My name is Esteban and today we are going to be learning about Svelte. So first of all, what is Svelte? Well, Svelte is a UI JavaScript framework that works the same as popular competitors like React and Vue, but has some interesting features and improvements that make it a little bit different. So let's take a quick look of what are those features. So the first thing is that in Svelte we actually write little less code compared with other frameworks. So let's take a look here. As you can see, we have a very basic application here. This is, by the way, this is the official site, and we can see here that we have a very basic application that is computing these numbers, and it's a really small code for doing that. You can see that we are binding the values to the inputs and we are declaring some variables, and if we compare this with, let's say, React, we have a different world here. So we have a lot more code for doing the same exact application, and if we compare that with Vue, we have a little bit more similar, but it still has some boilerplate. So this is one of the features that I really liked, that you can easily write application without worrying about boilerplate. So the second thing that makes Svelte different is that we don't use any virtual DOM for making updates into the application. So this is really important because if we don't use the virtual DOM, our application will be faster, and Svelte for doing the updates actually uses vanilla JavaScript. So your application does not have the framework when it's running. So that's really helpful, and that's why your application will be running faster. And another thing is that we have some really reactive features. So we're going to take a look at that later when we are into the code. So what we are doing today to learn Svelte, we're going to building an application. So this is what we are going to be building today. Is a to-do application. So let's take a look at what's in here. So as you can see, we have a list of pending to-dos and some completed ones. And what we can do here is check a to-do and it will be completed. So we are changing the state of the to-do, and we can also take any to-do back to the list. So this is going back to the list. So what you can see here is that we have some nice animations. That's something that Svelte gave us for free. And we can also delete the to-dos, so we're just removing for the list. And of course we can add new ones. So needs to be done, and now it's in the list. So it's a really basic application, but it's good enough so we can start learning how to build things with Svelte. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to start. We need, for getting started with this tutorial, we need Node.js installed in our computers, so we can use this tool called npx. And what this is doing is creating a new Svelte project from a template. So we have this template, and then we give it a name. So this is the equivalent of a create React tab, for example, for React, but this is how we do it with Svelte. And let's do it in our terminal. So let's just copy this. We copy this over here, and we have to give it a name. So just call this to-do, and now it's cloning the repository. And then we can start cd into the project. So we are in the project and we can install our dependencies. So let's just run npm install, and now it's installing the dependencies. so cool. So now let's just open this with VS Code. I'm going to use VS Code for this, and I can just write the code command here, and it will open a new editor. So we can now use this. Let's close, because we are not going to need that anymore. And let's also close this one. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do here is take a look at the folder structure. As you can see, we have our node modules folder, we have a public folder and a source folder. So this is where all our JavaScript and CSS is going to be compiled. So this is the place where you can serve your application from, and this is the source. So we have the source files from the application, and here let's take a look at the package JSON. So the first thing that I want to notice here is that we don't have as well as a direct dependency. As you can see, we have as a def dependency, and this is why Svelte is mainly referred as a compiler. So what this means is that this framework is not going to be included in your bundle, so it's a lot less overhead for your application. And we have some rollup dependencies. So that's the tool that this template uses to generate the JavaScript. You can also use Webpack if you prefer, but the default is rollup for this template. And we have some scripts that we can run, so we can build application. And we can also start a development server. And if we go back here, we can see that we have all the rollup config. So this is the main file that is the input of the application, and what's coming out, you can see that we are compiling the application to the public folder. And here we have another config that we don't have to care about for this time. So what's in the main JS file? So we're just importing our application from here, our component, our root component. This is our root component, and we are targeting the body of the HTML document, and we are passing some properties, and then we are exporting the app. So let's just run this application. We are going to use the build terminal, and let's just npm run dev. So this is the command that we are going to use to serve the application. And now there we have it. We can open this with this URL, this local URL. And we have our application. So this is what we have by default. And let's take a look at the component. So what I'm using here is the Svelte VS Code extension, and you can find it here. So we just have Svelte, and this is the one that I'm using. So this gives you the syntax highlight, and also you have some other features, like intelligence for VS Code, and we have formatting with Predator, and that's what I'm using. That's what I have. So let's just remove this. Let's close this for now and take a look what we have by default. So this is the property that we are passing from outside. So this is the name, and the way we declare props in Svelte is that we have to use the export keyword. So that's why we have that. And this is the script part of where we write our JavaScript, and this is the HTML part. So Svelte uses a template system. We don't have any JSX. We just use HTML, and we bind some JavaScript to the template. And for binding JavaScript, we use these brackets. So this means that we can now use this variable here and it will be displayed. And that's how it's working now, but I actually want to remove this, so I don't need this property for the project that we are building. And I also don't need, and we also have the styles. And the way Svelte manages styles is that we have scoped styles by default, so this means that this only will be applied to the component. And if we take a look here, this is what is happening. Let's take a look here. So as you can see, Svelte, what it does is adds this class, and this means that this is scoped to the component, so we don't mess with other styles of other components. So this is how we declare styles. So let's just remove this for now, and also remove all of this. And well, we have an empty component for now. And I don't want to care about CSS for this example. So what I'm going to use is this tool, this UI component library called Bulma. So Bulma gives you all the CSS, and you don't have any JavaScript here, which is nice. So you don't have any jQuery or something like that. And we're going to use the CDN. And let me just copy the CDN into the correct. So where I'm going to place this is in the index. You can place it other places, but let's keep it simple for now, so we can refer to the CDN here, and this means that we are going now to use the CSS by Bulma. So we have the CSS now, and let's start adding some things here. So the first thing that we need to do is we need some kind of state, so we can keep, our to-dos, and we can store the to-dos. So we need some kind of state. And for declaring a state in Svelte, what you need to do is you actually need to declare the state as variables. So we are going to say let to-dos equals an empty array. So this is how we declare state in Svelte. It's really simple. We only use row variables, and we actually need to use the let keyword because this is going to change in the future. We cannot use const. So this is where all of our to-dos are going to be. Let's now add some HTML markup. So what we need is an input box for adding the to-dos. So let me just use the section class that Bulma has, and I'm going to also use this field class. So this means that this is a input field, and this other class by Bulma. And now we can add the input that has the class input. Okay, we have some markup. So this is very basic HTML. And let's take a look at what we have here. Is just an input. And we might need some button, so we can add the to-do to the list. So let's just add a regular button, and let's add this here. So this is the content of the button. So this is looking not good. Let's just add some class. Button is success. So that looks a little bit nicer. So what we want to do here is we want to bind the value of the input so we can access the value. So for doing that, we have two-way data binding in Svelte. So first we need to declare a new variable. So let's call this input, and the initial value is going to be an empty string. And what we need to do here is just bind value equals input. So let's take a closer look of what we are doing here. So this is the property, the HTML property that we are binding. We need to use the bind keyword. So for doing this, and then we are saying that the value that we are going to bind is, we are using these brackets. So it means it's a dynamic value, and it's going to come from this variable. So when we are changing the input value, it's going to also update the input here. So let's take a look at that. So we can just use the brackets again and just bind the input value, and we are displaying that to the user. Let's see how that works. This is working. As you can see, we're binding the variable here, and every time this changes, it also changes the variable. We can remove that now. So we're binding the value, and now we need a way to add new to-dos to the list. So for doing that, I'm going to declare a function, and I am also going to add a DOM event to this button. So let's first add the function. So the way we do this in Svelte is we just declare regular functions, and this is going to add a new to the list. So what this function is going to do is, let's first declare how our to-do is going to look like. So we can say const to-do equals, and it's going to be an object. So it's going to have some properties. So the first one is we want to have an ID, so we can find the to-do, and it's going to be the to-dos that length plus 1. So this is going to be the ID. We're just reading this variable, the length of this variable, and adding 1 to that. And it's going also to have the title. And what's going to be the title is our input. So we can just say title equals input, and that's going to be the title. And we can declare an state, so it's going to be completed or pending. So we can just say it completed, and by default it's going to be false. So by default, every time we add a to-do, it's going to be false. So this is our to-do. We have now declared what we are going to add to this array. So the next thing is to actually add this to-do to the array. So one thing you might think that we can do is just push the value, but this will actually not work. Why? Because Svelte uses the equal operator to update the values. So if we use push, this is not going to react. So what we need to do is something I think clear, is to just declare a new variable. And what's going to be this to-do? We're going to update the to-dos. It's just going to be an array of, we're going to insert the to-do, the first to-do, and then we just spread what is currently in the array. So we're just declaring a new variable, and we are using this spread operator to spread the values of that we were previous here. And because we are using the equal operator, this is going to update the variable and is going to react to that. One last thing is we want to clear the input when this operation is completed. So for doing that, I'm just going to say input equals, and we are just resetting the input to an empty string. So we have our method, but we need some way to bind this to the function. So we need to add some event for that. So every time the user clicks here, this is going to be called. And for doing that, we can use the regular DOM events, but we have to add this on column in front of the event, and the event that we want to listen is the clicked event. And we're going to say, when this happens, please call the add function. So that's working. That's how we bind DOM events to this button. And another thing that's missing here is that we need some kind of way to display this to the user. So we need a list. For now, let's just see what's inside of the to-dos. So for doing that, we just can say JSON stringify, and we are just going to stringify the to-dos variable. As you can see, we have nothing, but we can start adding first to-do, and there we have it. We have our first to-do. Let's add another one, second to-do, and there we have it. We have the second to-do as the first one. So that's how we bind to events. So let's now display this in a nice way, because this is not looking any good. For doing that, we're going to first add another section here. So this is going to has the class of section, and it also is going to be columns. So we have two columns, one for the pending ones and one for the completed ones. Okay, we have the columns, and we want the first column, and this is where all the to-dos are going to be. So how we display that is really simple. We have to use, we want to iterate of every to-do, so this is an array, and for doing that we can use a logic block. So Svelte has this concept of logic blocks that you can write in your markup, and for doing that we first use the brackets, and we can just say each. So this is like a for loop, so we have this keyword called each to-dos, and this is the variable that we are reading, and we're going to give it a name, so as to-do. So this is actually every to-do that we have in the list, and we need to close this. For closing, we just use // and then we just close that, and that's closed. So that's how we iterate through arrays. This could also be used in objects, but now it's for an array. And what we are going to display here is another CSS Bulma class that's called notification. And is going to have the title of the to-do. So we just need to bind to-do that title. Okay, so there we have it. So we're iterating over this variable, and then we are using the variable here, and we are displaying the title of the variable. So let's see how does in our page. So first to do, and there we have it. Because we only have one column for now, we are using all the space. So second to do, and there it is. So third to do, and this is creating new DOMs, new elements for us. Okay. Another thing that I want to do here is that I want a way to change the state of a to-do. So it does no longer have, because these are all the pending ones. And I'm going to first add a checkbox, so we can do that. And let's just add another property here. So we can say input, and type's going to be checkbox. And what we want to bind here is, so we are going to again use two-way data binding, and we want to bind the checked property. So this element has the checked property, so we can say bind checked equals. So what this is going to bind is the to-do that completed property. So as you remember, we have this completed property. So this means that every time the user, let's just first to do, user clicks here, is going to change that. So we are changing that. So that's nice, but we need another column so we can display the completed ones. And we are not going to use now this to-dos variable. We're going to write some JavaScript here. So we can say to-dos, and I want to filter the ones that are completed. So I can write it like this: that are not completed. Complete. So this is going to filter over all of to-dos and just give us the ones that are completed. And what we want here is the ones that are completed. So we can write JavaScript there, and this is going to be the ones that are completed. So there we have two columns. So let's add the first one. This is going to be completed. And there we have it. We have here. Let's add another to-do. We have two, and let's just click here, and this one should be here because we are changing the state. So now you can see that's here, and we can also change this one, and it's going to be here. So that's how we can also bind to checkbox. And there's one thing that I don't like here, is that we are writing these properties this JavaScript here. It doesn't look so clear. So we can now start using another Svelte feature that's called reactive declarations. And you can think of in this like we have in view like computer properties. So I can say something like this. So I can declare, I'm going to declare a new variable, but for declaring this variable I need to use the $sign operator. So this is our way, or tell the compiler that this is going to change every time we have another dependent. So I'm going to say pending, so pendings. So these are going to be all the to-dos that are pending, and equals, and it's going to equal this. So we just write this here. And every time the to-dos variable changes, this is going to be updated. So that's how this reactive declaration works. So because we're changing this here, it's going to change. And if when we are changing the completed property, it's also going to change this one. And we are going to add another one that's going to be complete. And this is going to equal this one. So that's more, I think, more clear that we have this declared here and we don't have to write this logic. And now we need to remove this one, and we can just use the pendings and the completed variable, completed. First to do, and it keeps working, as you can see, because the variable is updated every time we change the value. So it keeps working. Okay, so that's how we use reactivity statements here. Another thing that I want to add is this is going to be a way to remove to-dos from the list. So actually I might want to have some default values here, so I don't have to write this any new time. So let's just add that. ID equals 1, and title is going to be first to status, completed equals false. So we have, let's just add another one. And this is going to be second to second, and it's going to be completed, let's say true. Okay, so we don't have to write every time we have someone's by default. Okay, so another thing that I want to add here is a way to delete or remove a to-do from our application. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to declare the method that's going to do that. So it's the same way, we just add function remove, and what this is going to do is just going, as you might think, well, we need to pass the to-do here so we know which to-do we need to remove, and we could use something like splice or slice for doing this, but as I'll tell you before, we need to declare a new value for the variable. So we're going to say to-dos equals, and what this is going to equals is we're just going to filter to the to-do that we are passing. Okay, so we're just we're declaring a new variable that's going to filter for the to-do that we are passing here, and this is going to remove that from the array. Okay, we have the method, but we now need to bind that to some button. So for doing that, I actually can use this button, this delete class, button delete. So we have this class that Bulma has. So this means that we can have something like this, okay, with Bulma, and we have to listen to an event. So we are going to say onClick, and what's going to happen when the user clicks is going to invoke this function, and we actually need to write the function like this here because we are not passing directly the function, and we are going to call the remove method, and we need to pass the to do. So that's how we do it, and now this should work. Okay, cool. So we have it there, but we also need it here. So let's just copy this, and we have it on both sides, and both sides works. Okay, so we have that. We have bind the remove button, but we need. I don't really like this because we are repeating ourselves twice for doing the same thing. So we might need to have some component that's going to have these properties. What I want to do here is I want to split this into different components, and what I'm going to do is just create a new file. So let's call this file to do, and the extension that we need is called well, you see it already, as we need to use the Svelte extension, and this is how we declare the file. Okay, so what we need in this file, we need first the markup. So let me just copy this one, and this is our markup, and we have some errors here. The compiler is complaining because we don't have this variable. Okay. And how we solve that is we need the script tag, and we are going to declare the variable. So okay, and we also need to declare this variable remove. Okay, so we have the variables that now is not complaining, and we can just use the component. Let's use it here. So we need to import the component, and we just use the import keyword, import to do from, this is in the same folder, and it's called to do that Svelte. So that's how we import the component, and we can use it here. So to do, and we're closing that. Okay, so we have some variables here, and we need to pass that variable. So we can say to do equals, and this is how we pass properties to props, to components, to child components. We just use the attribute, and we pass the variable. So this means this could be also be static, but we need this to be JavaScript, and we just going to pass the to do, and we also need the remove function. So we just pass the remove function to the child, and what's going to happen is that because I have prettier, is going to change this to a shorthand. So the shorthand is like this. Is going, because it's the same name, is going to have this in brackets, so it's shorter, but it's the same as before. It's just a shorthand that we have to declare properties. And let's take a look, and you can see that we have some errors here, and that's if you pay enough attention, you might see that we're using the let keyword, but this is not the correct way of declaring a property, as I said before, because we need to use the export keyword. So that's why we tell Svelte that this variable is going to come from outside. And now we have it again. Okay, but there's something that's, you can see that this is not working anymore, and this is because we are changing the value of the to-do inside the component. So the way we declare it here, it means that's only read only, but we need to bind the value so it can be changed from inside the component. And for doing that, we can use the bind keyword. So we are going to say bind to-do equals to-do. So this is our way to tell Svelte that this value is going to change. So we are basically two-way data binding, but this time with components. And if I save, it's going also to remove that, because this is another shorthand that we have. So let me check that again, and you can see that's working again, because now it's binding the value. Okay, so we actually don't need to bind the remove property, because this is just a function that's changing the value, the to-dos here inside this, and we can keep that as before. Another thing that I want to do is that I want to use the component here, so we can remove this. It was what we added this component. Okay, so it keeps working as before. It will be nice to show some color to the user, and we can do that in Svelte in this way. So you know, because this has a different state, so this might be, I don't know, green, and this can be blue, and this can be green. So let's do that. And for doing that, we can use class binding. We have some classes in Bulma that we can use. For example, is success. Sorry, this has to be here. And you can see that change to green. What we want to do is to bind this success class every time this to-do is completed. So that's for that we can use the class directive that Svelte has, and what we want to bind is the is success. So this is the sorry, we only need one. This is the class that we are going to bind, and we are going to say equals to-do that completed. Okay, so every time this is true, this class is going to be applied. So that's one way we can declare classes in Svelte. I think this is the nicest one. We can use another methods, but I think this works great. So as you can see, only this one is green, and if we check this, it's going to turn green, and the other one is that it has that other color. Another way to do this is we can just write some JavaScript here, some dynamic JavaScript, and say, for example, to do it completed. So if it's completed, we can use the is success. Otherwise, we can use the is info class. So this is another way to do the same thing. As you can see, we have like that, but I prefer the other way because this is kind of messy. So I think it's more clear what's going on if we use the class directive directly. Okay, I prefer it like that. Okay, another thing that I want to add here is if we remove all the to-dos, we are in this weird state that nothing is shown to the user, so that's not some nice user experience. We might need to show something here if there's anything there. And for doing that, I'm going to use another logic block that Svelte has. That's called the if block. So it's similar to this one, but in this case we can use the if keyword. And what we want to check if is the to-dos that length is greater than 0. We're going to show this, and we can close it like this. Okay, this is the case. Okay, there's no difference right now, but I can use an else block here. So this is the other case where we don't have any to-dos what we are going to display. So let me just add another section here that's going to say to add a new to-do, please enter, please write into the input and click add. Okay, so we have some blank state. So this is going to be displayed if we don't have any to-do in the page. Let's test it. And there we have it. Okay, there's some problem here. I added in the wrong place. So this actually needs to be moved here. So because we, of course, we need to have the input. And I'm going to add it here, and the else, and this is going to be here, and we don't need this one. Okay, this is not right here. Where I need to close this. Okay, there we have it. So this is going to be better because now we are displaying the input, and if the length of the to-do is greater than 0, we are going to display our to-dos. Otherwise, we are going to display this message. Let's test it, and there we have it. So we have that. And the moment we change, this is a new to-do, we remove that message from the DOM. Another nice feature that I can add with Svelte is that we can have some animations. And this is right into the framework. I actually don't need to install any other dependency. And what I want to where I want to use this is actually in the to-do. So every time a new object enters the DOM, it's going to display some animation. So this is what's entering and leaving the DOM. And let me just go here. And for doing that, I can use this. So I'm going to import from Svelte/transition. So this is the place where all the transitions are. I'm going to use for this example the fly transition. So I'm just importing that, and I can make use of the transition directive. So this is in Svelte. So what you can do here is just declare the transition that you are going to use for this case. So what this means is that every time this piece of this component enters the DOM, it's going to apply this transition. So let's check that. So as you can see, we have some transition there. So new to do, and you can see that we have this nice transition, and this is really customizable. So we have some defaults, but we can pass an object that has some configuration. Let's say I want to change the duration, so I want to make it a little bit slower, so I can have this duration of 1 second, and now it should be way slower. So you can see that. Let's make it a little more slower, and it lasts along now. So you can see how it disappears and it goes to the other side. Another property, we can also change the X position. So we can say that's going to come from 200 pixels from the X, and that's how it has this effect that is transitioning from one side to another. And this means that it's going to be applied when the element enters and leaves the DOM. So we can actually just trigger this only when this enters the DOM, and the behavior is going to be different. So now we enter, but if we remove, we don't have any transition. And there we have it. We have only when it enters, but when we click here, it did not trigger any transition. And we can of course use the out directive, and we can use another transition. Let's just use scale. So for this one, I'm going to use the scale. So every time this leaves the DOMs, it just slowly disappear. Okay, because it's lasting that long, that's why we had this behavior. Let's just make it like, I don't know, 500 milliseconds. Okay, looks better. Let's just use here the transition and remove this, because that's not what we want. Okay, so the last thing that I want to do with this application is that I want to fetch these to-dos from an API, because right now this is only working locally, but I may have some API that I want to query, so I can fetch that and display it to the user. And I'm going to use a tool that for doing this is called JSON placeholder. So this basically allows you to query for some dummy data into your application. And well, we are no longer going to use this. So we have a blank to-dos by default, and we are going to use a Svelte lifecycle. So we have some life cycles in Svelte. So for doing that, we are just importing the Svelte library, and we have here, as you can see, we have onDestroy and onMount. So onMount will be called when this first launched the first time, and is going to, this is the place where we want to call our API. So for using this, we just use this, and we pass a callback here, and this can be an asynchronous callback. So we're going to use asynchronous, the async keyword. So it means that we can use async and await, so it makes things more natural to read. And I'm going to say const response equals, so we're going to await this fetch call that's going to be to this URL. So this is the place where we have some to-dos, and these to-dos happen to match this structure. So that's really neat. There's the tool that I told you before. So this is how this works. So you can just query for this, and you have already some fake data that's coming from the internet. And we are going to call this, and we're going to say that to-dos. Okay, let me just move this here so it's more clear. So to-dos equals, we're going to await the response.json. So this is going to take our response and transform it to JSON, and we are declaring the new value here. Okay, we are fetching that from an API, and let's test it. We have a lot of data here that we did not enter. So this is coming. This is, as you can see, this is coming from the API, and this is how we can use asynchronous code in Svelte. So one thing is really bad here is that you can see that we are clicking and it's going to the last place. Maybe we want to, and we don't know where that is moving. So it's acting this weird, in a weird. It's kind of odd to see that at the end of the array we are not using the IDs. So that's happening because we actually can pass a key for every element of this. We can have a key for every element of this markup, and for doing that we can use this syntax. It's kind of weird, but that's how it works. So we are just going to say that the key is going to be the ID of the to-do. So this is how we say we are making sure that every item here has an identifier, and we can do the same here. And now this should work better. So as you can see, it's moving that to the correct position, and we move it here, we have it here, and that's how we can use that. So another thing that I want to have here is that we have some weird state that, for example, if this call takes a long time, is going to have this wrong message that says this, and what we want to have is some kind of loading state. So we displayed the correct message to the user when this is making the API call. So for doing that, I'm just going to declare a new variable that's going to be called loading. The first value is going to be false, the default value. So when we start loading, we're going to have loading equals true. So we are changing that, we're waiting for the value, and then we can say loading, and this time it will be false. So we have that, and let's use that in our template. So I want to have another value here that's going to say if it's loading, we are going to display something like this. So we have another message that's going to say loading, and we can use the else if value here. So this change. So if it's loading, it's going to have this message. Otherwise, if we have some to-dos, it's going to display the to-dos. And in case of false, or anything this logic, we are just displaying this to the user. So that's how we can have that, and let's just check. Well, it's really slow the time that we see that, but if this will take longer, we will be able to see that loading state that we just add. Yeah, so that's basically it. Thank you so much for sticking to the end. You can check the code in GitHub. I'm going to post the code in the description. And if you're interested in this kind of videos, I will be posting another video on how to deploy this application to the internet, and also how to add a state, store, have some state management in Svelte. That's really nice, and thank you so much for watching.